My wife slept with my brother, then took $250, $0 of our inheritance, and filed for divorce claiming I was abusive. Now she's trying to sell my family's property in the courtroom, and I have no idea how I'll fight back. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew my wife, Emily, better than anyone. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I always believed she was loyal, faithful. That belief got shattered in the most brutal way possible. The thing is, I had no idea just how deep her betrayal went until everything came crashing down in less than a week. It started with small things, little signs that I brushed off at first. Emily started working late more often, claiming she had extra meetings or was catching up on work. She became more distant, less affectionate. I'd catch her sneaking her phone away when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes darting nervously. I told myself it was just work stress, maybe some personal issues she didn't want to share, but deep down I knew something was off. Then came the night I found the text message. I was sitting in the living room scrolling through my email when I saw a notification pop up on Emily's phone. It was a message from someone named Jake, with a heart emoji. My stomach clenched. I didn't even need to read the message fully. Just the way she responded, the way she signed off with an affectionate "can't wait to see you tonight," told me everything I needed to know. I waited for her to come home that night, heart pounding. When she finally walked through the door, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I confronted her about the message. Her face went pale for a second, then she gave me that same bitchy smirk she always used when she thought she was in control. "Oh, that. Just some coworker. Nothing serious," she said dismissively, brushing past me like I was bothering her. But I wasn't convinced. Something about her reaction told me she was hiding something. I decided to dig deeper. That night I went through her phone when she was asleep. What I found was worse than I expected. Not just one message, but a whole string of flirtatious texts, pictures, and plans to meet up. They'd been sneaking around for weeks, maybe longer. She was sleeping with my own brother, James. I found out she'd been meeting him secretly, and from what I saw, it wasn't just sex, it was a full-blown affair. The betrayal hit me like a sledgehammer. My brother, my wife, the woman I loved and trusted. I couldn't believe it. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? I felt sick, angry, devastated all at once. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I had to think carefully. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was also about the money, the inheritance we had saved for years, and the way she was planning to take everything with her. The next morning, I confronted her again. I showed her the messages, the pictures, everything I had found. Her response was unbelievable. She lied, of course. Said it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything, that I was paranoid and jealous. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting, that I was the one causing trouble. But I could see the guilt in her eyes, and I knew she was lying. That moment marked the beginning of the end. I felt betrayed, yes, but also furious. How could she do this to me, to our family? How could she take our inheritance, $250 that was meant for our future, and spend it on her affair? And how could she file for divorce, claiming I was abusive? That was the last straw. I knew I had to fight back, not just for the money, but for my dignity and my sanity. I spent the next few days trying to process what had happened, but I also started planning my next move. I knew Emily was manipulative, a liar, and she'd do anything to get her way. I had to be smart. I started gathering evidence, talking to a lawyer, and figuring out how to protect what was mine, our property, our inheritance, everything she was trying to sell off in court. This whole situation has turned my life upside down. I'm still trying to figure out how to come out of this with some semblance of control. I never thought I'd be the guy whose wife slept with his brother, stole a massive chunk of inheritance, and then tried to destroy him legally. But here I am, fighting to keep what's rightfully mine and wondering how I got to this point. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know one thing. I won't go down without a fight. After the initial shock wore off, I realized I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had to do something. Emily was already spinning her lies, trying to paint herself as the victim, claiming I was abusive and unstable. I knew her game. She always played the victim when she was caught. But I couldn't let her get away with it, especially not after what I'd uncovered. The first step was gathering concrete evidence. I started digging into our financials, pulling bank statements, transaction records, anything that could prove her intentions. I hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and property disputes. It was clear she was planning to sell off our family property, a long-held estate that meant everything to my family before she even entered the picture. I could let her do that without a fight. Meanwhile, I kept her under surveillance, not in a creepy way, but enough to confirm her moves. I installed cameras in the house discreetly to catch her in the act if she tried to destroy anything or sell property without my knowledge. It was painful, watching her act normal, pretend everything was fine. But I needed to be one step ahead. Every move she made was a threat to what I was fighting for. One day, I caught her trying to transfer ownership of a piece of land, an inheritance from my grandfather, to her sister's name. She was desperate, trying to hide her plans. I confronted her that evening, showing her the evidence I had gathered. She exploded into a tirade, calling me paranoid and accusing me of spying on her. She said I was overreacting, that I was ruining everything because I was insecure. But I knew better. I knew she was trying to steal what was legally ours. Her attitude was infuriating. She kept lying, twisting everything around, making herself the victim. She told me I was abusive for questioning her, that I was paranoid because I didn't trust her. She even had the nerve to cry and pretend she was the one being wronged. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her manipulations. I had to stay calm, keep my focus on the facts, and prepare for the legal battle ahead. In the meantime, she continued to act like she was innocent, but I noticed her behavior changing. She started pushing harder to sell the property, arguing that it was the best way to settle everything quickly. I knew it was a distraction, a way to get rid of the evidence and her financial tracks. I had to act fast. I contacted a forensic accountant to analyze our finances, looking for any signs of her trying to hide money or assets. The emotional toll was heavy. Every day felt like walking on thin ice. I was angry, betrayed, and hurt, but I knew I had to stay composed. I couldn't let her see how much she'd broken me. I also started documenting everything: her threats, her lies, her attempts to sell property, and her interactions with James. It was all evidence I'd need if this went to court. One night, I found out she'd been secretly meeting with a real estate agent trying to list the estate for sale. That was the final straw. I knew I had to act fast to stop her. I filed an emergency injunction, freezing the sale and halting any transfer of ownership. It was a small victory, but I knew the real fight was just beginning. I also started talking to friends and family, trying to get support. I needed people who knew the truth, who could testify if it came to that. The betrayal from Emily and James was one thing, but I didn't want her to get away with it all. I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine, no matter how dirty things got. Throughout all this, I kept questioning myself. How did I miss the signs? How did I end up in this nightmare? I thought I knew Emily, but now I realize everyone has a side they hide. She was manipulative, cunning, and ruthless. And James, my own brother, that one hit hardest. The one person I trusted most in the world turned out to be part of her scheme. I kept telling myself I'd get through this. I'd fight for my property, my money, my reputation. I'd prove her lies wrong, but honestly I felt exhausted. It was like fighting a shadow, always one step behind her. Every day brought new surprises, more lies, more deception, more betrayal. I knew she'd try to destroy me in court, spin her stories, and manipulate the system. But I was ready to fight dirty if I had to. At this point, I realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, lawyers, maybe even private investigators. I was prepared to do whatever it took to stop her from taking everything I cared about. The worst part, knowing she was doing all this while pretending to be the victim. That's what made it so hard to keep my composure. She's so good at lying, at manipulating everyone around her. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. The legal battle started to heat up faster than I expected. Emily was relentless, pulling every trick in the book to try and sway the court in her favor. She hired her own lawyer, a slick, aggressive woman who seemed to thrive on making my life difficult. Every day, I received new documents, false accusations, and attempts to paint me as the abusive husband she claims I am. It was like fighting a battle on two fronts, her lies and her manipulations versus my evidence and resolve. One of the most infuriating moments came when Emily's lawyer submitted a statement claiming I had a history of violence and that I was an unfit parent. I don't have kids, but she was trying to use my reputation against me to gain an upper hand. I knew it was a lie, but that didn't mean it wouldn't hurt if it got into the court records. I had to be smart to counter every lie with facts. I gathered witnesses, neighbors, friends who could testify that I was a responsible, caring person. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to protect my name. Meanwhile, Emily's side was trying to push through the sale of the estate. She had already gotten a tentative offer, and I could see her pushing hard to finalize the deal. I was determined to stop her. I filed a motion for an injunction, citing the evidence of her attempts to transfer ownership illegally. That was a game changer. The judge granted the injunction, freezing all sales and transfers until the case could be fully examined. But Emily wasn't done. She started playing dirty. She accused me of emotional abuse, claiming I had been controlling and manipulative. Her words were designed to turn the court against me, but I stayed focused. I had the evidence to disprove her claims. I hired a private investigator to look into her recent activities, especially her meetings with James. What I uncovered was staggering. She'd been funneling money from our joint accounts into her sister's business, trying to hide assets. It was then I realized how deep her deception went. She wasn't just cheating and lying. She was actively trying to take everything I had, including our family's legacy. The inheritance, the estate, the property, she saw it all as hers. I couldn't believe I married someone capable of this level of betrayal. It felt like my life was unraveling piece by piece. I also discovered that she had opened multiple bank accounts under fake names, transferring large sums of money without my knowledge. I brought in forensic accountants to trace every dollar. They confirmed she'd already siphoned off more than $100, $0, and she was planning to drain the rest before the court even had a chance to intervene. I was furious. How could she do this? How could she betray me, my family, and everything we built? Throughout this chaos, I was also dealing with the emotional fallout. Every time I saw her smirking or lying through her teeth, I felt a mix of rage and despair. I had loved her once, trusted her, shared my life with her. Now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, greedy woman who saw me and my family as obstacles to her ambitions. It was hard to accept, but I had to stay strong. In those moments of despair, I remembered something my grandfather used to say: "The truth always comes out." I clung to that. I knew that no matter how much she tried to hide, the lies would eventually be exposed. I also knew I had to prepare for the worst, her trying to push the case to the limit, making false accusations, and trying to turn the court against me. One evening, I sat in my living room, staring at the pile of documents, recordings, and messages I had collected. It was overwhelming. I felt like I was fighting not just for my property, but for my reputation, my sanity, and my dignity. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I had been betrayed in ways I never thought possible, but I refused to let her win. I was going to fight for what's mine, and I was going to do it smartly. That night, I drafted a detailed timeline. Every lie, every deceit, every financial transfer, every interaction with James. I knew it was my most powerful weapon. I also started reaching out to people who knew Emily's true character: old friends, family members, anyone who could testify to her manipulative nature. My goal was to build a case not just on the legal level but emotionally, showing the court who she really was. It's astonishing how quickly trust can evaporate. I used to think marriage was about loyalty and honesty. Now I see it for what it really is: a fragile bond that can shatter in a heartbeat if one person chooses to betray it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I've become more cautious, more guarded. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours, especially when the other side is willing. To lie, cheat, and steal. Every day feels like walking a tightrope. I'm exhausted, but I refuse to give up. I owe it to myself, to my family's legacy, to keep fighting for justice. Emily may think she's clever, but I have enough evidence to tear her lies apart. The court will see her for what she truly is, a manipulative, greedy woman who's willing to destroy everything in her path. And when this is all over, I'll finally be able to breathe again, knowing I did everything I could to stop her from taking what's rightfully mine. The court hearings became a whirlwind of accusations, evidence, and strategic moves. Emily's lawyer was relentless, trying to paint me as the villain, but I had my own arsenal of proof. I brought in witnesses who testified to my character, showed bank statements where she transferred money without my knowledge, and presented the surveillance footage that caught her meeting with the real estate agent. Every piece of evidence was like a brick wall, blocking her attempts to manipulate the court. What really pushed her over the edge was when I presented the forensic accountant's report. It detailed how she'd been funneling thousands of dollars into her sister's business, money that was supposed to be part of our inheritance. That was the moment the judge looked at her with suspicion. Her face went pale and she started to stammer. I could see her realizing that her carefully crafted lies were crumbling beneath her. But Emily wasn't one to admit defeat easily. She doubled down, claiming I was emotionally abusive, saying I had a temper, that I was controlling, and that I had a history of violence. Her lawyer even brought in a few witnesses who claimed to have seen me lose my temper once or twice, though it was clear they were plants. I knew I had to counter this smear campaign with facts. I had recorded conversations, messages, and even a few neighbors willing to testify that I was a responsible, caring person who never raised his voice in anger. The most infuriating part was her attempt to turn the court against me by claiming I was an unstable, abusive husband who had been hiding his true nature. She played the victim, crying and pretending to be the hurt wife, while I sat there feeling like I was watching a bad soap opera. But I stayed calm. I knew her game. I responded with calm, clear facts, nothing more. I refused to be baited into her emotional trap. In the middle of all this, I was also fighting to keep the estate from being sold. Emily had already listed it with a real estate agent, trying to rush the sale before I could get a proper legal hold. I filed a motion for a temporary restraining order, arguing that the sale was part of her scheme to deprive me of my inheritance. The judge granted it, which was a big win, but I knew it wasn't over. Emily was already planning her next move. The most shocking moment came when I discovered she'd been secretly opening new bank accounts under fake names. She was trying to hide assets, moving money around to make it harder for me to claim what was ours. I hired forensic investigators who confirmed she'd already moved over $150, $0 into these accounts. That was a huge blow. She was actively trying to drain everything and leave me empty-handed. Behind the scenes, I was also working on my emotional resilience. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, but now I saw how fragile those things could be. Every lie she told, every betrayal was like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let her see how much she was hurting me. I kept my composure, focusing on the facts, on the legal strategy. I knew that if I cracked, she'd have an advantage. In the midst of all this chaos, I started to question everything. How did I miss the signs? How did I end up married to someone capable of such deceit? The betrayal by James, my own brother, was the hardest to process. I always thought we'd be there for each other, but now I see that trust can be broken in an instant. I felt a mixture of heartbreak and disgust. How could he do this? How could Emily, the woman I loved, turn out to be this manipulative, greedy person? I also began to realize that winning this case wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about protecting myself from her lies, her manipulations, and her attempt to destroy my reputation. I was fighting for my dignity. Every day, I reminded myself that the truth would come out. I just had to stay strong and keep pushing forward. In the quiet moments, I reflected on what I'd learned. Trust is fragile, I thought. It takes years to build but seconds to destroy. And when someone is willing to lie, cheat, and steal, you have to be prepared to fight for what's rightfully yours. I knew Emily wouldn't give up easily. She was cunning and ruthless, but I was equally determined. I had more evidence, more resolve, and I wasn't afraid to use every tool at my disposal. The most difficult part was balancing everything: legal battles, financial investigations, emotional stress. I felt like I was on a roller coaster that wouldn't stop, but I also knew that I couldn't let her ruin me. I had to hold my ground, no matter how much she tried to manipulate the system or paint me as the bad guy. I was fighting for my life, for my future, for the truth to come out. And I was going to win, even if it took everything I had. The courtroom saga dragged on for what felt like an eternity. Every day was a new battle: more lies, more evidence, more attempts by Emily to manipulate the judge and jury. She was relentless, trying to spin her narrative that I was an abusive, controlling husband who didn't deserve a dime. But I had the facts, and I had the truth on my side. My lawyer kept pushing back, countering her accusations with solid evidence, witness testimonies, and financial proof. One of the turning points came when I finally got a court order to examine Emily's bank accounts and financial records. What we found was staggering. She'd been secretly transferring money into accounts under fake names, funneling thousands of dollars into her sister's business, and even taking out loans in our joint name without my knowledge. We also uncovered a series of false affidavits she'd filed, claiming I had physically assaulted her, which was completely fabricated. The evidence was damning. It was clear she was trying to hide her assets to prevent me from claiming my rightful inheritance. The court saw through her lies, and I felt a flicker of hope. But Emily wasn't done. She started pushing hard for a quick settlement, offering compromise deals that were clearly designed to buy her time and drain my resources. I refused. I wanted full justice, not just a quick exit. Meanwhile, the emotional toll was intensifying. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. Every night I'd lie awake, replaying everything, feeling betrayed by the woman I once loved and the brother I thought I knew. The heartbreak was profound. How could they do this? How could Emily, the woman I trusted with my life, turn out to be this manipulative, greedy liar? I'd trusted her more than anyone, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered sense of reality. One day I had a breakthrough. I discovered a series of encrypted messages between Emily and James discussing their plans to wipe me out, sell the estate, and start fresh. They'd been conspiring behind my back, trying to cut me out of everything. I immediately handed this evidence over to my lawyer, and it turned the tide in my favor. The judge was furious at their deception and ordered a full forensic audit of their accounts and communications. At the same time, I started preparing my final case, collecting all the evidence, organizing the timeline, lining up witnesses. I knew this was the moment to make my stand. I was determined to expose Emily's true character once and for all. I also reached out to close friends and family, asking them to testify about her manipulative tendencies and her history of lying. I needed to leave no doubt in the court's mind. The most emotional moment came during the final hearing. Emily sat there, trying to look innocent, but her eyes betrayed her. I saw the guilt, the desperation. My lawyer delivered a powerful closing argument, emphasizing her pattern of deception, her theft of our inheritance, and her betrayal of her own family. When the judge finally announced the verdict, awarding me full control of the estate, ordering Emily to pay back the stolen money, and denying her custody of any assets she tried to transfer, I felt a wave of relief. But even with the victory, I knew the scars wouldn't heal overnight. The betrayal by Emily and James had left deep wounds. I was angry, hurt, and disappointed. I'd lost trust in the woman I once loved and in my own brother. It was a painful lesson about the fragility of loyalty and the destructive power of greed. Looking back, I realized I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust has to be earned, not blindly given. People can hide their true nature behind a pretty face, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. I also learned that fighting for what's right requires resilience, patience, and a relentless attitude. You can't let lies and deception go unchecked, or they'll destroy everything you've built. Now, as I prepare to move forward, I feel a strange mix of relief and caution. I know Emily won't give up easily. She's already hinted at appealing the verdict. But I also know I've done everything I can to protect my future. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to defend what's yours, and I'll never trust blindly again. Most importantly, I realize that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived betrayal from my own flesh and blood, and I came out the other side with my dignity intact. That's worth more than any inheritance or property. I'm still healing, still trying to rebuild, but I'm determined to reclaim my life and leave this nightmare behind. After everything that happened, I've had a lot of time to reflect. The courtroom victory was just the beginning of my recovery, but it also marked a turning point. I realized I had been living in a bubble, trusting blindly, believing in the fairness of the system, assuming that honesty always wins. Turns out, sometimes you have to be prepared to fight for what's yours, especially when the people closest to you are capable of such deception. Since the case wrapped up, I've been trying to piece my life back together. It's not easy. There's a deep sense of betrayal that lingers, especially when I think about Emily and James. The image of my brother, someone I'd trusted since childhood, colliding with my wife in a web of lies and greed, is a hard one to shake. But at the same time, I've come to understand that not everyone is who they seem. Some people wear masks, and if you're not careful, they can destroy everything you hold dear. The financial aftermath has been a mixed bag. I managed to recover most of the inheritance through the court's ruling, but the emotional damage was harder to fix. I've taken steps to protect myself, changing passwords, cutting ties with people I no longer trust, and learning to be more cautious with who I let into my life. The trust I once gave freely has become a guarded commodity. I can't afford to be naive anymore. One thing I've learned is that you have to be your own biggest advocate. No one's coming to save you, you have to fight for yourself. I also learned the importance of documentation, keeping records, saving messages, recording conversations. That evidence was what ultimately saved me. Without it, I might have lost everything, including my reputation. As for Emily, I don't think she's truly changed. She's already trying to appeal the court's decision, claiming she was wrongly accused, that I'm the real problem. I don't plan to let her get away with it. I've made peace with the fact that some people are just toxic. The best thing I can do now is focus on rebuilding my life, away from her manipulations. I've started therapy, which has been a huge help. It's not just about coping with the betrayal, but understanding how I got here in the first place. It's about healing and learning to trust myself again. I've also reconnected with friends and family, people who know the real me and who stood by me during the darkest days. Their support has made all the difference. Looking back, I see how much I've grown. I used to believe in loyalty and honesty as absolute virtues. Now I understand that those qualities are fragile and must be guarded. I've become more cautious, more aware of the signs that someone might be hiding who they really are. It's a painful lesson, but a necessary one. I hope my story serves as a warning and a lesson for anyone going through similar struggles. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it can be shattered in an instant. Always be vigilant, protect your assets, and document everything. And most importantly, don't be afraid to fight for what's right, because sometimes that's the only way to survive the storm. Finally, I want to say this: I still believe in love and honesty, but I also know that I have to be careful. The world isn't perfect and people aren't always who they pretend to be. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but I'm hopeful. I'm rebuilding my life, my integrity, and my sense of self. The pain will fade, and someday I'll find happiness again. Until then, I keep moving forward, stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever life throws my way.